Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya, who led last month's coup in Guinea, is sworn in as interim president. The UN Security Council to privately discuss Ethiopia's expulsion of 7 UN officials. And South Africa to introduce COVID passports as it eases some restrictions. Hello and welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. And with me in studio is Uche Okoronkwo with a preview of your business news.
Thanks, Lindy. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. Egypt taps into the international bond market for a second time this year. And Nigeria records its highest export of agro-food items in the second quarter of 2021. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, back to Lindy.
Thanks, Uche. In your top story this hour, Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya, who led last month's coup in Guinea, has officially been sworn in as interim president. Doumbouya, who led the overthrow of President Alpha Conde on September 5th, was sworn in for an unspecified transitional period. The interim president has promised to respect all the West African states' international commitments. The ceremony was held in Conakry on the eve of a public holiday celebrating the 1958 Declaration of Independence from France. A blueprint unveiled by the junta on Monday shows the president will be barred from being a candidate in elections that will take place after the transition.
I would like to reiterate my commitment that neither I nor any member of the National Committee of the Rally for Development and the Transitional Bodies will be a candidate in the upcoming election.
The UN Security Council will privately discuss on Friday a decision by Ethiopia to expel 7 UN officials. This comes as UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres expressed shock over the expulsion of the UN officials accused of meddling in the country's internal affairs. In a statement, Guterres said UN staff are guided by impartiality and neutrality and expressed full confidence in them. Guterres added that the UN is engaging with Ethiopia's government with the expectation that the said staff will be allowed to continue working. Ethiopia has accused humanitarian workers of supporting the Tigray forces fighting its soldiers, and aid workers have denied the claims. So what does this mean for the UN's humanitarian work in Tigray? A short while ago, we spoke to Tembise Fakude, Senior Research Fellow at Africa-Asia Dialogues in Johannesburg, about this.
Well, it's going to have an impact on the humanitarian efforts in Ethiopia, particularly in Tigray, because the main relief organization that has been working in Tigray has been the UN. So when you have the UN expelled by the government, it means that the situation is going to get even much more dire, because other smaller agencies or relief agencies will have difficulty in reaching that part of the world, particularly because of the logistical challenges. So you expel the UN, you are going to have a deteriorating situation. Moreover, the Ethiopian government has not been able to reach many places, particularly those areas that are still controlled by TPLF. So the only neutral body that could do that work has been the UN. So the situation is likely to deteriorate moving forward. Well, first of all, it's been bad news for Ethiopia. I think they've made a mistake by expelling the UN. I mean, once you start touching the UN, it's down spiral from there, because you begin to question your legitimacy in terms of you not being part and parcel of making the situation deteriorate, particularly in Tigray. But I don't think it's going to be easy moving forward, because the fact that the UN agents and representatives were expelled in the first place, it means that when they return, they'll have to be very careful in terms of how they act. They have to be careful in terms of what they say in their official statement. And that in itself will restrict the work of the UN, because they'll be treading on eggshells moving forward. Whereas in the past, they were acting and working freer than they will when they return. So the UN will be much more confined in terms of how they'll act. And I think the Ethiopian government will be watching furthermore on how they will be acting after the first expulsion.
South Africa has plans to introduce COVID-19 vaccine passports. The passports will be used as proof of vaccination for various purposes and events. President Cyril Ramaphosa says an immunized adult population is key to fully reopening the economy and avoiding a fourth wave of infections. In a televised national address, Ramaphosa also announced that the country has further eased lockdown restrictions. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela has more.
Under the adjusted level 1 lockdown, the curfew moves to between 12 p.m. and 4 a.m. More people are now allowed to attend indoor and outdoor gatherings.
The maximum number of people permitted for attending meetings indoors will increase from 250 to 750. And the maximum number of people permitted to attend meetings outdoors will increase from 500 to 2,000. Where the venue is too small to accommodate these numbers with appropriate social distancing, then no more than 50% of the capacity of the venue may be utilized. This includes religious services, political events, social gatherings, as well as restaurants, bars, taverns, and similar places.
The easing down of these restrictions come just a few weeks before the country holds local elections. The president also announced that COVID-19 vaccine passports will now be effected.
The Department of Health will soon be rolling out a vaccination certificate, which will provide a secure and a verifiable proof of vaccination. This certificate can be used to facilitate travel, to access establishments and gatherings and other forms of activity that require proof of vaccination status.
Ramaphosa also tackled the issue of South Africa's red listing by the United Kingdom. South Africa is currently one of 54 nations from which arrivals to the UK must enter hotel quarantine. The UK says South Africa is on the red list because of the beta COVID-19 variant. This is despite the fact that the Delta variant is the most common variant both in South Africa and globally.
I had a telephone conversation with the British Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, to discuss this matter. I put South Africa's case to him, which he understood very well. And we both agreed that decisions of this nature should be informed by science, and we are both hopeful of a positive outcome when the issue comes up for review in the coming days.
In its efforts to accelerate the vaccination campaign, government will embark on the Vuma Vaccination Weekends campaign. The countrywide drive is to encourage South Africans to get vaccinated. Despite the positive outlook, health experts are warning that the fourth wave could be on the horizon, especially with the upcoming local elections in November. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
A number of Congolese citizens are calling for justice for women who were allegedly sexually abused by workers of the World Health Organization and other aid agencies during an Ebola outbreak that occurred between 2018 and 2020. Their reaction comes in the wake of a damning report that identified more than 80 sexual abuse cases committed in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo. CGTN's Chris Ochomaringa has that report.
The sexual abuse scandal by staff of the World Health Organization and other aid workers in eastern DRC has attracted the fury of many Congolese. They are outraged that the abuse was committed by staff of reputable organizations during an Ebola outbreak. A panel commissioned to investigate the sexual abuse claims found that the majority of the alleged perpetrators were Congolese staff hired on a temporary basis. The Director General of the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, issued an apology and promised to take action against the perpetrators. But some Congolese citizens say the WHO should do more.
Survivors of those sexual abuse and exploitation need to receive reparation. And the reparation here, we're not just talking about the health or just a psychological support, but we really mean this should go behind. It should be holistic. There are young women who have lost all hope. So this has to reparation to them means to take it all the way to what can make them as whole human beings again.
I'm not happy about the findings of that report. It revealed terrible things that our sisters were subjected to. The government and the WHO have to ensure that the perpetrators face the law. That will serve as a lesson to other workers of humanitarian agencies. I'm from North Kivu province, and those victims are my sisters. I want this resolved once and for all.
The allegations of sexual abuse were first made public by journalists of the Thomas Reuters Foundation and the New Humanitarian last year. The journalists talked with more than 50 women who accused aid workers of demanding sex in exchange for jobs. An investigation by an independent panel identified 83 cases of sexual abuse. 21 of them were committed by employees of the World Health Organization. The WHO said it will refer the cases to DRC authorities for criminal proceedings. The scandal happened in the DRC's eastern towns of Beni and Butembo during the country's 10th Ebola outbreak that began in 2018. That outbreak ended in 2020, but an ongoing conflict in that region has claimed the lives of many people and forced thousands to flee their homes. Chris Sochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
You're watching Africa Live. Time now for a short break. Coming up, a conversation with Rwanda's ambassador to China on partnerships in trade, investment and health.
I try to not let it affect me, but there are days when it does. I'm a human being, and to see patients in a hospital bed and their family members are not there, there's no one there to hold their hand, that human touch, you know?
I just hope everyone can remember that the situation is not permanent and that everything will get better eventually.
Twenty 2021 marks 50 years of diplomatic relations between China and Rwanda. And through platforms such as the second China-Africa Economic and Trade Expo, the two nations continue to deepen ties. Rwanda has been gradually expanding its exports to China, further globalizing its local markets. My colleague Liu Xin brings us more insight from Hunan in China on how the two countries are profiting from each other through business as well as cultural relations.
Let me say hi to my guests here in Changsha. To my right, my colleague.
Hi, Lucian. I'm Huang, and I'm enjoying time with the ambassador. It's my great honor.
So Mr. Huang Chen was a former CCTV correspondent to Africa. To my left is a guest from Rwanda.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm Senjumva Ale Abraham. I'm from Rwanda, as she said. I'm currently studying here in China, International Trade and Economics, in Central South University of Forest and Technology. Thank you.
Central South University of Forestry and Technology. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you very much.
And of course, we have our distinguished ambassador joining us from Beijing, Ambassador James Kimonyo of Rwanda to Beijing. Ambassador, how are you? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Leo. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for joining us. Tell us a bit exactly where you are at this moment.
Hello, thank you. First of all, let me say good afternoon to our viewers. My name is James Kimonyo. I'm the ambassador of Rwanda to the People's Republic of China. I'm now in Beijing at our offices.
The warmest welcome, and thank you very much for doing this with us. So today we are going to introduce the country of Rwanda and especially the products from Rwanda. The complete dry chili. It has a very nice fragrant.
Yeah.
But I imagine when you stir fry it, when you put it in food, it can add a lot of flavor.
It will be more delicious than you think.
Yeah.
But I think our Hunan citizens will enjoy this.
we'll let the people in Hunan to judge it. How about that?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, but let me have a little bit of. This is Rwandan tea as well.
This is Rwanda tea. Yeah, this is Rwanda tea.
Okay, so Rwandan tea
is very good. You can try it.
This is the first time, dear Ambassador, that African products that is not resources, that is processed, that has been brought into the Chinese market. Help us understand what kind of efforts, what kind of investment has been put in there to help Rwandan farmers make more money out of their produce instead of just raw chili, but to help them make more profit, have more value in their trade with China.
Thank you very much. I think that's a very important question to ask ourselves. Now that we have this big market, what is needed is now enough investment to make sure that we produce more to be able to supply the Chinese market. But even as we speak now, we have already seen a lot of profits to the farmers. Because currently, I should say that the buying price is at about $1.5 per kilogram of dry chili. And in the Chinese market, the farmers are being offered $2.5 to close to $3 per kilogram. So you can see already the prices that are offered to our farmers are very good. And this has triggered the interest from different farmers to enter into chili production.
How about transportation? Because, we know at this moment international trade or international people-to-people exchanges have been greatly disrupted by the pandemic. How about goods trade?
Yes, we indeed, COVID-19 has disrupted global supply chains. Rwanda is blessed to have worked with China to promote e-commerce, whereby Rwandan products, coffee, chili, are being sold on Chinese electronic platforms. So that is one way of dealing with the issues of transportation of goods, even though we still have to transport chili through sea and air transport. But again, electronic platforms are becoming so critical, especially during this time when COVID-19 has disrupted global supply chains.
Sure. Has the first batch of Rwandan chili arrived in China?
Absolutely. We actually signed the protocol to bring chili to China in March. And immediately after that, the suppliers started mobilizing. And in July, we received the first consignment, and a number of containers are on their way to the Chinese market.
Great, great. We're really looking forward to that. So, Alain, you have been here since 2018.
Yeah.
You must not be able to go back to your home for a couple of years now. How does it feel?
For me, I think I don't feel bad, but I'm fine here because China, as you say, is a good country and also is a developing country. And the government is trying to give us the safety we must have in this kind of pandemic, and also the good measures for everyone, for every citizen of this country to have a good health in this period. I think I feel good. I feel at home here in China.
Huang Cheng, you have been to Rwanda. What was your impression of the kind of will or the kind of perception of Chinese investment in Rwanda? Were people enthusiastic to have more development opportunities with the cooperation of Chinese investors?
Yes, and the Chinese businessmen in Rwanda, they are very satisfied with the support from the government. And they told me that the government is high efficient and they are disciplined. That means, and also just they can, if they want to set up a company, and they just maybe in number one day, they can register in the government. Mm-hmm. So they said that comparing with the whole African country, maybe Rwanda is among the best.
Dear Ambassador, in terms of the kind of cultural differences or similarities, what advice would you give to the millions of people who might be watching in Africa and wondering what China is or how difficult it might be to deal with Chinese business people or to, to do business with Chinese people? What would be your advice or suggestion?
Well, it's a very good question, and I would want to say that it's so exciting for me to be in China. You may want to know that I have served in so many different continents, different countries. I've met with different people, experienced different cultures. But I tell you, we have wonderful people. And there are similarities in our traditions and culture and how you treat strangers and visitors and guests, and the hospitality really that you get from the Chinese people is very unique. And you meet with the Chinese for business over lunch or dinner. That is time to enjoy. It's not about eating and going. You eat in the middle of your meal. You stand up. You go around. You talk to a person across the table, and you exchange ideas. That's where you actually do business around the meal or food with the friends and the business people you talked about. So I should say that my experience has been exciting, and and the perception that if you go to China, it's very difficult for you to communicate with people. Apparently, that's a perception. You have so many Chinese speaking other languages, and when you are here, you actually try to. I'm not like LA, but I can order some food when I go to a restaurant. So it's really, I should say, my experience is wonderful. Is a good experience, and I want to say something, Liu. Because I came in China in 2019, that was my first time. Stereotypes are terrible things, are very dangerous. Because you have not been to China, what you see in the Western media is totally different from what you see when you come to China. This country has really been very, so advanced, is so developed. People have worked very hard to move from where this country was 40 years ago, and it's something that should be commended by anyone who comes to China, whether it is in the capital or whether it is other cities or rural areas. I want to express my appreciation for what the government of this country has done, the people of this country have done to change their lives. So when you come here is when you begin to tell the story, wow, like China has done extremely well. So I should say that my experience has been wonderful, has been exciting, and I still want to, if COVID is behind us, want to explore and go to many other parts of this country.
Thank you, Ambassador, for those generous comments and extremely positive. We want to show to the world how China really is, so that there is greater understanding. And I understand also in Chinese we say 患难见真情, meaning in times of difficulty, true friendship shines through. And I think that has been a very good example over the past few years, 1.5 years, especially because of the pandemic. So I want to find out a little bit more about what these two countries have been doing in terms of helping each other to fight the virus. Huang Cheng, what do you know about what kind of exchanges, what kind of help the two countries have been giving each other in those difficult times?
I know something, and at the very beginning of the pandemic, I was very moved by African brothers and sisters. That at that time, China is in urgent need of masks. And almost all African countries are open and very positive to net the masks exported to China. And there is a story.
So they did not restrict the export of masks.
Yeah, even the block is not enough, but they let us buy it. And let us and let the masks export to China. And especially the customers, they keep them very quickly.
Customs.
Yeah,
the
very
customs.
Quickly.
Okay, they clear the goods.
Yeah, clear goods very quickly, and so that at the very beginning, China can get the necessary supply of the masks. But you know that in turn, when China, the situation under control, China sent the medical teams and also send the masks and also vaccines to our African brothers and sisters. I think, and we are really, I mean, a friend in need is a friend indeed, I think.
Let me get back to our ambassador. What kind of measures have been taken place to facilitate the collaboration between China and Rwanda, for instance, in fighting the pandemic?
Yeah, Rwanda has done extremely well in terms of containing the spread of the virus by more or less applying the same measures that China applies in terms of making sure that people protect themselves by wearing masks, cleaning their hands, social distancing, and applying other measures where necessary. For instance, if you have an outbreak in a particular area, they are put under lockdown, restricted movement, reducing hours for people to go out, and that has really, made Rwanda to be able to contain it, and to the point where now people are freely moving in the country, of course taking precautions. And Rwanda has been removed on the list that of the countries that are restricted from traveling to Europe and other parts of the world because of the fact that we have been able to contain the virus. So we have done that, and that's why we are seeing the number of tourists increasing, because they know when they come to Rwanda they are safe, and we make sure that their safety is ensured. So that is the situation as we speak now. In the past few months we have had another wave which we were able to contain, and we are happy to say that currently the situation is really better than what we had in the past few months. China was the first few days before we had registered cases on the continent. China was in shock, and many countries stood with China in terms of moral support, and where possible, some materials, I know some business leaders in Rwanda mobilized some masks and all that. But to a large extent, China really supported many African countries, including Rwanda. China was the first respondent in terms of providing PPEs for Rwanda in the first few days, where the government and everybody was in shock and confused, and without knowing what to do. And so China really supported us by providing those materials. Of course, subsequently the government was able to buy more from China. But as you know, countries were trying to contain the spread of the virus, the scientists were, working day and night to come up with vaccine, and Chinese scientists were among the first in the world to come up with the vaccine. And when the vaccine was ready, you may want to know that the Chinese government already donated thousands of vaccines to Rwanda, and we are very appreciative of that. Of course, in our cooperation we have Chinese medical teams that are on the ground, and they helped supported the Rwandan teams to deal with the pandemic.
Well, we're really happy to see that there has been so many measures, so many cooperation going on to help countries fight the virus together. So that's great news. Finally, dear Ambassador, this year we also mark the 50th anniversary of diplomatic relations. Actually, it falls sometime in November, I understand. It's coming up. So what are your expectations in terms of bilateral ties, including economic and trade ties?
Thank you very much. Indeed, this year we're celebrating 50 years of our bilateral cooperation with China. And we have enjoyed decades of warm and friendly bilateral cooperation, reflected in many different areas, in trade, in investment, in education, in health, and many other sectors. During the opening ceremony of China-Africa Economic and Trade Expo, our president was among the speakers, the three presidents who spoke, the president of Rwanda, Senegal, and Algeria. And in his statement, he actually did say that our intention, Rwanda's intention, is to deepen our friendship even further in the coming half century of cooperation, which means building on the milestones of our bilateral cooperation in the last 50 years. We will be thinking forward, going forward, what do we do together? How do we continue to work with China? And China is already really in the high gears in terms of working with Africa, bilaterally, but also through the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, FOCAC, whereby China is really supporting mainly the African continent to bridge the infrastructure gap. And of course, Rwanda, we have a number of projects supported through that framework, but also through Belt and Road Initiative. We are looking at other important sectors like education, health, agricultural transformation, technology, and so on and so forth. So we have a number of areas that we want to focus on so that we are able to build on the milestones and the achievements we have had and going forward to be able to achieve more in our partnership. So on 12th of November, we'll be coming together with our Chinese friends to celebrate. And as we celebrate, we also think of how we continue to build a very positive and prosperous future for our common interest.
Thank you so much, dear Ambassador, for those kind words of hope and great expectations. I'm sure a lot more will happen, and I'm sure the people here will continue to enjoy all the products that you have promoted, including, first and foremost, the chilies. And once again, let's wish all the very best for the chilies. I'm sure the people here in Hunan will love it. Once again, thank you so much, dear Ambassador. Thank you for your time and your insights. Yeah.
Thank you. I hope to see you in Beijing. When you come visit our embassy, we have coffee and talk more about Rwanda.
Thank you so much. I'll see you back in Beijing in the near future. That is it for this Tea Time with an Ambassador, hosted by me, Liu Xin from CGTN, and my friend Alan from Rwanda, Huang Chen from CMG. And many thanks for all of you who have been following us.
Thanks for staying with us on Africa Live. Let's now go to Uche for your latest business news.
Thanks, Lindy. And Africa Live starts off in Egypt, which of course has tapped international markets for $3 billion in dollar-denominated bonds. Now, this is its second Eurobond issuance of the year, joining a rush of emerging market governments who are taking advantage of low borrowing costs before the U.S. Federal Reserve starts tapering its pandemic stimulus. Here's Yasser Akim with the details.
The $3 billion issuance was 3 times oversubscribed by foreign investors. It follows another oversubscribed $3.8 billion Eurobond issuance earlier in the year.
Egypt's strong economic showing, financial footing and strong future outlook by international organizations give us support to easily cover the bond issuances. The money will be spent on basic necessities such as the ongoing national and developmental projects, as well as paying off other foreign debt in dollars.
The government has been aggressively tapping different borrowing mechanisms from the IMF and World Bank to euro, dollar and green bonds. Some fear this quick accumulation of international debt can be harmful to the economy, but others have calmed those fears.
Egypt used to issue short and medium-term bonds from 5 to 10 years. Now we issue 30 and 40-year bonds. These long-term bonds with high foreign investor demand are proof of confidence in the Egyptian economy and less burden on state budget. In 2017, the debt, local and foreign, reached 105% of GDP. Recently, although we keep issuing bonds and taking loans from the IMF, but our debt to GDP is down to 92%. This shows that our GDP is quickly rising in the last few years.
The government is still going to tap the international market again. It had approved plans to issue a still undisclosed amount of Islamic Sukuk bonds for the first time, expected before end of the year. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
And let's move on now. The head of the World Bank, David Malpass, says that Sudan's economy is improving, but urges patience as the country seeks to tackle shortages and attract investment. Now, inflation slowed slightly last month to 388%, and a sharply devalued currency has shown signs of now stabilizing. The trade deficit declined 43% year-on-year to $1.2 billion in the first half of 2021. Meanwhile, Sudan's economy has been mired in a crisis that led to the overthrow of former leader Omar al-Bashir in 2019 and has continued since. Over the next year, the World Bank says it will commit about $2 billion in grants to help tackle poverty and inequality and also boost growth. Now, earlier this year, Sudan also paved the way for extensive relief on more than $50 billion in foreign debt by enacting rapid economic reforms as well as unlocking access to international financing. However, many Sudanese are struggling with poverty, shortages of medicines, and of course, power cuts.
Sudan is making a transition from a violent situation, from a situation of shortages, to the situation that is gradually improving. It takes time to go through this process, and it will be important for people to approach it with patience and with tolerance for each other, knowing that the whole that Sudan is building, a nation, is going to be stronger than the individual parts.
And in Tanzania, the Dar es Salaam Stock Exchange has joined Rwanda and Kenya stock markets as East African stock exchanges now race to attract companies and end the persistent IPO drought. Now, the Bourse is implementing a program designed to support SMEs in their quest for long-term capital financing from investors. Through the project, SMEs will also get capacity building for sustainable business management, as CGTN's Daniel Kijo now reports.
The Dar es Salaam Stock Exchange, or the DSE, has joined Rwanda and Kenya market campaigns to increase the number of companies listing on the exchange. The Endeleza project takes small and medium-sized businesses through a mentorship program to prepare them for the possibility of going public. Victoria Microfinance is one of the 9 companies under the program. The company's management team says the company has helped provide loans for over 9,000 small-scale farmers and has been in operation for 12 years. But through the program, they have already seen more growth.
We learned about governance. We learned about, legal framework of business. We learned about even things like how you can be able to raise capital, various ways of raising capital. A lot of very good mentors, very good program. I think it's one of the best programs I have ever, attended so far.
The exchange is using the program to prepare companies to raise capital from the exchange by inoculating good corporate government practices and helping them to keep proper books of accounts.
In our estimate, we think in a 3 to 5 years period, we might see these companies which are now in Endeleza graduating to come into either the enterprise growth market segment of the market or the main investment market of the DSE.
In Tanzania's financial markets, perhaps the most popular investment scheme is the savings account from banks that are licensed by the Bank of Tanzania. Dar es Salaam Stock Exchange's CEO Moremi Marwa feels more listings would allow companies and citizens to invest in a wider portfolio.
If you look at our economies, which are young economies and we are still developing economies, most of the enterprises that pays taxes to the revenue authority or creates jobs and employment to our people, they are coming from the SME space. So much as it's easy for SMEs to tap into the banking or microfinance or Vikoba and SACCOs as part of their capital, but we think also there are some that will qualify to get the patient kind of capital that is obtained in the capital market.
East African countries are considered the most expensive markets for stock investors in the continent, with a bulk of the trading costs related to brokerage fees. The country's biggest IPO was listed in August of 2017 When the telecom company Vodacom raised $206 million, it attracted more than 40,000 local investors, most of whom were first-time participants in the country's stock exchange. The DSC hopes to recreate that in the near future through programs like Endeleza. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Meanwhile, in Tunisia, policymakers have raised alarm over the rising wage bill and debt interest repayments, which now account for more than two-thirds of the state's expenditure. Now, according to documents released by the Treasury, Tunisia's public debt stood at $35.2 billion, and that's at the end of July 2021, up 11.2% compared to the same period in 2020. Well, as Adnan Ashaushi now reports, economic watchers in the country have urged the new government to urgently implement reforms in order to address the worsening economic crisis.
Experts say Tunisia's outstanding debt consists of 39% of domestic debt and 61% external debt, including 55.4% loans taken as part of multilateral cooperation agreements and 16.8% under bilateral cooperation agreements, while 27.7% of these debts were incurred on the financial market.
The current debt exceeds the Tunisian economy's repayment capacity. Consequently, Tunisia's sovereign rating has been downgraded 9 times. The current sovereign rating shows that Tunisia is considered by international financial markets as a high-risk country. It's almost impossible to get foreign loans.
The wage bill and funding expenditures dedicated to the repayment of interest on the debt account for more than two-thirds of the country's spending at the end of July 2021. Salaries, which amount to about $4.2 billion or 11.7 billion dinars, represent 56.7% of total state expenditure.
The average public sector wage bill in the world is around 8 to 9% of the state budget. It's around 18% in Tunisia, and this is despite the fact that there was a written commitment between the former government and the IMF to reduce the wage bill to 12.4% by 2020. Tunisia needs to deal with this problem before any foreign reform plan is imposed upon the state.
Tunisian and foreign experts assert that drivers of inclusive growth need to be rebalanced in the North African state to mitigate from an impending economic crisis.
It's important for the Tunisian government to develop a short-term reform plan to stop the negative trend of the economy. It also needs to rebalance growth in the middle term, which should be higher than 5%, because this is what Tunisia needs to redress its economy.
According to the Ministry of Economy, Finance and Investment Support in Tunisia, 61.4% of Tunisia's debts are in euro, 21.6% in US dollar, 10.3% in Japanese yen, and 6.7% in other foreign currencies. Tunisia's compensation expenses for subsidized sectors and products went down by 19% to some $566 million in the first 7 months of 2021 compared to the same period of 2020. 65% of these expenditures are directed to the subsidy of commodities. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
And Nigeria recorded its highest export of agro-food items in the second quarter of 2021. That's according to data from the country's Bureau of Statistics. The total value of exports of agricultural products rose to $403 million. But as CGTN's Deji Badamosi reports, there's still a downside for Nigeria as agro imports still outpace exports.
The agricultural export figures from the National Bureau of Statistics is perhaps a pointer that the government's aggressive policy on agriculture is yielding results. The $403 million export is a 112% increment over the $189.5 million recorded in the same period last year, and 30% higher than the $309 million recorded in the first quarter of this year.
The current government has made significant efforts to see that we revamp the agro sector so that we can feed ourselves as well as earn more revenue in order to, supplement what we get from oil.
Nigeria's leading agri exports are cocoa and cashew nuts, accounting for approximately $153 million and $105 million respectively. Adeyemi Adeniji, who is one of the leading exporters of the products, says the country could actually do better than the statistics show.
What you have just seen is that people have started changing their attitude towards export. In actual sense, what you only see is it might have grown marginally because of the perpetual poverty that driving people to look inward. What we have abandoned before, we are looking at it now, but it is still less than 10% of our capacity.
But while Nigeria's agric export is growing, so is the country's agric import. The report from the Statistics Bureau shows agric import for Q2 2021 rose 56.9% year-on-year to a high of about $1.6 billion, creating a massive trade deficit of approximately $1.18 billion and literally eroding the gains that have been made.
You can't have a balance when you have the kind of population that we have. This is the amount of food we're trying to produce to feed local consumption. So there's going to be a disproportion in the value of what you are exporting and the value of what you are importing.
The basic thing is this: our agricultural export is not value added. We're basically exporting raw agricultural products. And so there's no benefication. And there's no country that has become an industrialized country by exporting or producing only basic food items or what you call extractive industry products. Countries develop because they're able to add values to whatever is produced, whatever raw material they have in their country.
The huge deficit means despite the positive growth in Nigeria's agric export, the country still has a lot of ground to cover to narrow the trade gap. Deji Bademasi, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
And that's all for now on Africa Live Biz. But coming up later on Global Business Africa, we'll be looking at the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, how it works and what to expect from it. Of course, all that coming up top of the hour. For now, back to Lindy.
Thanks, Uche. Do stay with us. Your sports news coming up next. Coming up, the story of the Afghanistan girls national football team and how they got to Lisbon.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
In your sports news, Brazilian football legend Pelé has been discharged from hospital after